What makes the achievement of emotional sobriety so difficult is the habits we have, the patterns we have in our behavior, the habitual ways that we've come to think about things. We have to really become aware of those things in order to challenge them, because the consciousness that has created a lot of the problems in our life cannot solve it, cannot change things. So what happens is the first step is waking up. We have been looking at the 12 steps and how they help us achieve and find and discover emotional sobriety. But this time, as we're passing through the steps, we're doing so from the perspective of looking at how they also help us develop what we're calling an authentic, humility-based self-esteem. And I'll just remind you that self-esteem is the evaluation you have of yourself, or as Dr. Brandon would say, it's your reputation with yourself. It's your feelings towards yourself. I believe that no one among us has good self-esteem, or we wouldn't be here. There's a whole new approach to thinking about alcoholism and drug addiction and other disorders as a failure to protect ourselves, as a safety issue. Well, if you don't feel worthy of success and love and care, then you're not going to protect yourself. You're going to put yourself in harm's way. So what we're doing is we're trying to restore what I would call our natural state, or restore our true self. You know, our true self is designed to take care of us. You know, as children, you see, self-regulation is just built into our being. You know, we're constantly regulating our temperature. We're constantly, monitoring our heartbeat and regulating our heartbeat. If we're okay, things happen normally. If not, then our bodies respond to take care of us. So that's all a part of us. Well, the 12 steps, I think, are an incredibly powerful program. And we know that because they've changed the lives of millions and millions of people. So, as we approach now, we're still on step number 10. I love what Bill says in the beginning of this, in the 12 and 12. He says that steps 1 through 9 were preparing us for the adventure of a new life. Well, what do we mean by the adventure of a new life? Well, if we continue to talk about this from the emotional sobriety perspective and a self-esteem perspective, it means a new life that is founded and grounded in a whole different set of principles. You see, many of the ideas that we had when we were growing up, and the ideas that we got in this crazy culture that we live in, are part of a big lie. They send us messages is that we are more the more we have. And so we lose sight that our character and developing character is important in life and important in our development. So all of us kind of, develop with kind of a skew to one side, much more on the side of having rather than being. This is a culture that's focused on having, not a culture that's focused on being. Being is something that's related to your character, who you are as a person. Now, I think because we are in this culture that the healthy person is going to be able to balance the having and being in their life. They're not just going to be able to be in this culture. You wouldn't fit in that way. So in order to be a part of this culture, we have to balance those two forces. Now we come to step number 10, which is continue to take personal inventory, and when we're wrong, promptly admitted it. Steps 1 through 9 set us up for this adventure. As I said, steps 6 and 7 are very important because they are the pivot steps. They're pivoting us towards the best possible attitude. First of all, the best possible attitude towards our problems. Secondly, the best possible attitude towards our relationships. And now we're focusing on the best possible attitude towards ourselves and our relationships. Because when we continue to take personal inventory, we are acting in our best interest. Bill said it this way in the 12 and 12. He says that step 10 is putting our new way of life into practical use. Day by day, in fair weather or foul. So what we've learned is that there's a set of principles that we can use to be able to show up and deal with our life with regardless of what's going on. That we're able to show up and start to, what I would call, is to take the experiences we're having, especially the painful ones, and extract some emotional wisdom from the experience we're having. Now, I can't do that alone. A lot of you know I'm in a real personal crisis at this point in my life. And I'll tell you, people like Roger, the therapist that I'm working with, Thom, my sponsor, and lots of other people, Thom Rutledge and Herb Kaighan, and the list goes on and on and on, have been remarkable in helping me show up and be able to deal with this experience and try to grow from it. Now, Bill goes on to say in this step 10 is that no one can make much of their life until self-searching becomes a regular habit. And think of that a minute, is that our ability to bring a curiosity to our lives and to start asking ourselves, what's going on here? How did this happen? What are the forces that are operating in my life that created this? What are the forces that are operating in my life that are getting me to react in the way I'm reacting? I love the image that Dr. Virginia Satir uses. She says, when I hit a problem in my life, I draw a big circle and I put myself in the middle of that circle. And then I start asking myself questions like, what is going on? How am I interpreting this experience that's causing me some difficulty? What expectations am I bringing to this situation that I'm reacting to? And one of her final questions, which I love, what part of what's going on in my difficulty with this is caused by my lack of faith in my ability to grow and to learn and become more mature? You see, that's what starts to happen with this step. As we now integrate step 10 into our life, we develop an ongoing practice of this self-searching, of this self-developing and promoting more and more, or facilitating more and more self-awareness. Now, what does that lead to? Well, Bill talks about that we need to be able to admit and accept what we find and patiently and persistently try to correct what is wrong with us. Instead of saying what is wrong, I don't like that. There seems to be too much a judgment to that, but to correct what we need to correct in order to become what we can be. What is off with us is a better way of describing us. What is maladaptive? What isn't working that well for us? Those are the things that we're looking at. Now, in step 10, we learn that there's really 3 different kinds of inventories that Bill is encouraging us to do in our lives. The first one is the spot check inventory. That spot check inventory is when I'm in trouble, something's going on, and I find myself upset. Declan didn't do something I think he did, and now I'm pissed off at him. Well, what's going on? What was my expectation? Because if I'm upset, Bill reminds us in this chapter that it's a spiritual axiom that every time I'm upset, no matter what the cause, there's something off or wrong with me. It's not Declan. I'd like to blame it on him. And, most of the time, all of us are either blaming somebody or blaming ourselves. But blame is irrelevant. In fact, one of the things you will find that the more and more you achieve emotional sobriety, blame drops out of your vocabulary. It's not a part of your vocabulary any longer because it's irrelevant. It's not about who's to blame. It's about what are we going to do with the situation? How are we going to deal with it? Okay, so spot check inventory. When we're upset, what's going on? I've suggested, and some of you have seen the inventory sheet I have for emotional sobriety, which starts with describing the situation you're in and being able to get a sense of what your expectations were, what your demands were on how people should be different, then understanding how that's tied to your emotional dependency. And then the last one is how to unhook yourself from those expectations. That's where our freedom comes in. So that's what we're doing with a spot check inventory. We're kind of examining ourselves and what's going on that's getting me to react this way. Bill also encourages us in this step to take some time at the end of the day and review it. Did I not check in with myself? Did something really upset me and I didn't take the time to look at it and examine it? And this is a good time to do that, to kind of review where things are going, to see if there is someone you need to make amends to the next day, and then making a commitment to do that. But he also advocates in this step that you, and I would say to do this at least annually or semi-annually, you sit down with someone that you trust and you review where you're at in your recovery and what's been going on. You take stock in the progress you've made. You take a look at some of the things that still need to be worked on. You come up with a sense of what am I going to do this year now to start growing myself in these directions. This becomes an important thing because what we're doing in practicing this self-examination is we're monitoring our progress. We are not resting on our spiritual laurels. We are constantly looking for what can I do to continue to become what I can be. And as long as I stay aligned with that growth force, that self-actualization that's in each one of us, I'm going to continue to thrive in my life. I just want to read a few other things from this section and this book, and I just love it. He goes, he's talking about when we start to take a look at these things and we start realizing what's going on. He says, in all these situations, we need self-restraint, an honest analysis of what is involved. I would say what is involved in terms of our expectations, our unenforceable rules, our demands, our claims. We have to have a willingness to admit when the fault is ours and an equal willingness to forgive when the fault is elsewhere. We need not, and this is such an important part of what he's talking about in this, we need not be discouraged when we fall into the error of our old ways, for these disciplines are not easy. We shall look for what? Progress, not for perfection. So this becomes an important part of this because no one among us is going to be able to work this program perfectly. Yet each one of us is going to try. There's no question about that we're all a bunch of perfectionists at heart. We're going to try to work it perfectly, but we're not going to pull it off. And there needs to be some kind of grace and compassion when we fail, so that we can continue on this path. Don't beat ourselves up. Don't get on your back, but get on your side. That's what I say all the time, is recovery involves walking side by side with ourselves and encouraging us to continue to take one step in front of the other. Now, what this does is, in terms of emotional sobriety, it creates a certain freedom. Because emotional sobriety says, I'm okay even if. My being okay does not depend on what's going on, what the experience I'm having, but it depends on my relationship to that experience. I'll say that again. Emotional sobriety does not depend upon the experience you're having, but on the relationship you're having with the experience you're having. We talk about claiming the experience, not letting an experience claim us. And that means by taking a look at what's going on with us, practicing this self-examination, becoming aware of what our expectations are, what our demands are, what our unenforceable rules are, and starting to address those things. Now, those of you that know I'm in a personal crisis, there's another level to all of this. Because sometimes what upsets us has some very deep roots to that, right? That those issues that are really jarring us and shaking our world are connected to early childhood trauma. Ernie Larson calls this stage 3 recovery. Is that when you start to practice this step, there's going to be an opportunity if you keep your eye out for it. And that's the big thing here, is to keep your eye out for it on how sometimes our disturbance is related to some work that we need to do that's really deep in our life. So let me invite Roger and Thom Rutledge and Herb Kaighan into the room with me and let them share what they'd like to share about this step. And I see my buddy Raj. There's Thom. I feel safer already with you guys here.
Yeah.
The 4 Musketeers. Here we are.
Hey,
Well, who wants to
I'll start with I'm going to read you the text that I sent Roger this morning.
Okay.
Because this is the way I started my day. Recently I'm reading Thomas Merton's The Inner Experience. So I just sent this, reading Thomas Merton this morning, simultaneously enlightened, lost, confused, crystal clear, spinning my tires in the mud, free, overwhelmed, peaceful, validated, agitated, discouraged, hopeful, fully present, and MIA. Yeah, really not any of that. And so I was, so that's, to me, that's the point I would like to make tonight, is that it's not step 10. I've been thinking about step 10 today from that perspective today, that because one of the things that Merton says in this book is, I love this, when he's talking just about introducing the book. I need more light. It's like I'm old and blind. He says, this book has no intention of solving anybody's problems or of offering anybody the easy way out of their difficulties. And it says one of the strange laws of contemplative life is that if you do not sit down and solve the problems, what you do not do is sit down and solve problems, but you bear with them until you discover that they can solve themselves. And what my point here is I've become more and more focused as we've gone through it this time, dealing with step 10 with this, that step 10 is the move into fully into daily practice, into what Merton is calling the contemplative life. But we talk about, we focus on that second part, the making amends whenever, that's always been the place I focus on, making amends whenever, whenever I screw something up. But it's that constant, it's not a consistent inventory. It's a constant inventory. It's a way of being present with myself. And I'm thinking about today, and especially reading with what I was reading this morning, I'm thinking in terms of so much of step 10 happens intrapersonally, silently with me, with any of us, that we're, it's not just the things that actually that come out, that we mess up a communication, or we offend somebody, or we do that. It's the back and forth and the constant correction we're doing on the inside as we learn and to apply what we've learned. I call it the gatekeeper in my head, that does so much better job of helping me decide what gets out and what doesn't get out, what I process with other people and what I don't, and how I go about doing that. So it's like, I like the idea of step 10 also, besides being a way that I remain accountable to other people, it is a way that I am, it is maybe mostly important, a way that I am remaining accountable to myself. So that's what I got.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Roger, what was your text back to Thom?
I have yet to send one.
He didn't respond. He didn't respond.
He didn't respond, man. Oh my
He hurt me. He hurt me deeply. He ruined my day. It's like
and Herb sent me a really nice email on self-esteem, and I haven't gotten back to Herb yet either. So thank you for that, Herb. And
I
thank
love
you for
that
that,
email
Thom.
on self-esteem today, Herb. That was a good one.
Yeah, yeah. Actually, Herb, would you be okay with going next?
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, a couple things, Alan, what you said. First of all, Bill's very clear in the big book that when we finish step 9 and begin to practice 10, 11, and 12, we enter the world of the spirit. And my prejudice up until 10 minutes ago was that meant that we needed to establish our relation or continue to fine-tune our relationship with God, because self-reliance is the problem. But listening to you, Alan, I had a new insight that in fact step 10 is about a relationship with myself. That's the import of step 10, whereas 11 is a relationship with God and 12 is a relationship with other people.
Right on.
And the formula for step 10 is actually minimizes the relationship with God, although it starts out by saying pray. The rest of it's all human development. It's talk to somebody, make an amends to somebody, and help somebody. And so that actually, and you use the word align, and that's my word for the third step. And I think the purpose of the 10th step, I'm disturbed because I'm out of alignment with reality. And step 10 is the tool of me becoming back in alignment with reality itself. And for the last couple of years, actually, I've been using the term partnership with God as a new kind of relationship. And I saw, wow, that's actually fairly limited today. Based on your comments, Alan, you talked about partnership. And it's really a partnership, certainly with God, but it's a partnership. Step 10 is a partnership with myself. And I had never put it in that kind of words. And then step 12 is a partnership with other people. And that's one of the stresses that he makes in, I think it's step 10, that we have as human beings a very difficult time establishing successful partnerships with people. Right. And so this has all been very rich for me.
In some ways, you say it, Herb, it's a recapitulation of what we did in the first 9 steps.
Yeah.
A
little reversal of the order in that
yes.
The first 3 steps are about our relationship with God. The next 4 steps are relationship with myself, and the next 2 steps are relationship with other people. But step 10 is it's really establishing a relationship with myself. Right. And then with God, and then with people, and I've not seen that before. That may not mean anything to anybody else, but it means a lot to me.
Well, it does, and it's a new relationship with ourselves, right? It's one that's based on
a partnership with me. Oh my, I'd never used that term.
It's we're now integrating all the things we learned about what is a healthy relationship.
Yep. So thank you for prompting the discussion.
That's nice. I can see your gray matter shifting around in my mind, right?
There's a lot of smoke in that sawdust.
As you listen to Alan's talk and have what therapists would call it a reframe, right? A very different way of perceiving or conceptualizing. So, gosh, where to start? I think to put more of a self-esteem spin or context to our discussion tonight, Thom, you have repeatedly through these months, and more than months now, years, talked about, in our confusion and in all the complexity of this, because to me, everything we're talking about is incredibly complex. But one of the concepts that you keep a very clear vision on a lot of the time is self-respect, right?
Mhm.
Is this action
Yep.
I'm considering taking going to help build or diminish my sense of self-respect?
Mhm, mhm.
And of course, the way Nathaniel Branden, who we're using his work on self-esteem as a kind of foundation for our talk about self-esteem, he describes self-esteem as the integration of self-confidence and self-respect, right? And then he includes in self-respect what you referenced earlier, Alan,
Mhm.
briefly, a sense of self-worth, right? A
Yeah.
sense of being, as you've often talked about it, Herb, I'm bringing all three of you in here. Am I deserving of love, or do I feel
Mhm.
undeserving of love? And that self-perception, when you talk about step 10 being fundamentally
Mhm.
about our self-relationship, will determine a lot of our choices and decisions and behavior, a lot of our future. How deserving or undeserving do I feel? And my perception is, in many ways, I myself and most everyone else I know really struggles with the issue of how deserving do I feel of,
Mhm.
love? How deserving do I feel of happiness? From my point of view, any kind of relationship that we can have with other people, and anything we can do toward other people, we can also do and will do to ourselves. If we see other people as untrustworthy, well, a particular person may be untrustworthy in a particular area of their life. But I always like to try to spin that backwards. How trustworthy am I to myself, not just to other people, but in terms of that self-relationship that you're talking about, Herb? How much have I earned my own trust? You talked about, you know, self-esteem being the reputation we acquire with ourselves, right, Alan, in terms of Brandon's definition of that. And many times in my life, the reputation I've acquired with myself sucks. It's not good. It has not been good. In another person, I would judge it, right, as this or that. The hard thing for me is to hold a mirror up to myself. And you're inviting us to do that, Alan, with the idea of, twice a year, semi-annually or annually, do an assessment, take stock, right? Not rest on my laurels if I have any to rest on, right? But to say, to point toward how am I doing with continuing progress. Now, for me, the piece about in an ongoing way each day, trying to have an awareness of how my relationship with me is going, especially in terms of self-respect and self-confidence, and how my behavior toward others is going. And all I can say is I'm a lot better than I used to be when I was
Right, right.
younger, right? At trying to stay in tune or attuned to that, to trying to put myself in the position of the person I'm interacting with and imagining what their experience is with me. And it's an almost impossible, it is an impossible task to do perfectly, but it's a really difficult task, I think, to do very well at all. But I think if I can slow down enough in my mind, as well as in my breathing, as well as in my emotions, if I can slow myself down enough to just pay attention, there's something in me that's just kind of naturally inclined to be in the world in a way where I bring that kind of attention to my self relationship and to people that I'm interacting with. Now, occasionally, an entire day may go by where I don't return a text from somebody I love, or I don't return an email from somebody I love, right? Occasionally, that's going to happen. Occasionally, I'll call myself out about it, or might even be called out by someone else about it. But the point is,
In public, yeah.
in public. But the point is, the more I've been able to start to live a practice of self-acceptance, the more attuned to others' responses to me, and the more attuned to my impact on them I've been able to become. I'm still incredibly oblivious sometimes, especially the more I'm connected to something I want or something I need. In that I-ness, I can still become very quickly self-centered, extremely self-focused. And part of what that means is I'm not paying attention to the other, right? I'm just not. And I noticed that, I think that's kind of naturally true for all of us. When I really need something or really want something, that's what I'm identified with, that, right? That part of myself. And I'm going to have a big blind spot, right? In terms of my functioning. When my son was a little kid, and I could tell I really upset him and hurt him once because I snapped at him, I barked at him. I started asking him, and he was really young, Nick, please tell me when I do that with you. Please tell me when I hurt your feelings. And I didn't do that to be a great dad. I did it because I felt terrible about the impact that I had had on him. And in that moment, at least, I was open to the realization that I needed help, right? I needed help from him. Because if I'm up against one of the family rules I grew up with in my family, and he violated it, oh my God, I was shocked at how much anger or irritation would rise up in me. He can't do that. I couldn't do that. Now, almost all the time, I was able to respond to that in a way where I wouldn't act on it, but sometimes I would, right? So that's the value to me of trying to stay connected with the wrongs I've done people during my day, to try to clean them up as quickly as I can, to try not to do them in the first place if I see things are starting to go that way. And in that, I tremendously increase my sense of self-esteem, because as I keep saying, to me, a lot of our self-esteem is rooted in a very healthy and appropriate way in how I influence the people around me and how I allow them in positive ways to influence me. Not in terms of unhealthy emotional dependency, although I certainly do my share of that, but just in terms of, how I treat other people matters. It matters a lot to me. So that's all I got for tonight. And thank you guys for what you shared. I got a lot out of that.
Thanks. It's good.
One of the things I was flashing on as with what you said, Herb, is in another way of thinking about it, step 10 is a way of now keeping the integrity that we've developed.
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
So we start to think about it, it's really maintaining that integrity that we've worked so hard through steps 1 through 9 to now develop, right? In one way of thinking about recovery is recovering our integrity or our humanity again. So it's really, it's really cool to put it in this framework. It's really great.
I hear a lot of people criticize the 12 steps, that they're old-fashioned. I can understand that criticism. They were written back in 1935. Some people that are agnostic have difficulty with the word God used in the steps. For me, I look at the process that's involved. The forces that the 12 steps generate are so powerful that I think they're ageless. There's this interesting phenomena that happens when you work the steps. They create a charge and then a discharge. The first step, we're powerless. Our life has become unmanageable. It creates this charge. We're in big trouble and we don't know what to do. And then step 2 comes along and it says we have hope. That charge, that existential crisis that we have is resolved. What's happening here is parallel to life. We charge ourselves when we breathe in. When we exhale, we discharge. That's the rhythm of life. And the way I love to think about the 12 steps, it's helping us get connected to the rhythm of life so we can learn how to show up in a good way.